At the family photo shoot, my 6-year-old daughter sat in the front row, smiling. We got the Christmas cards back, and she'd been photoshopped out of every single one. She burst into tears when she saw it, asking what she'd done wrong. I didn't yell. I did this. The next morning, my mom opened her gift and went pale. The stack of Christmas cards lay on the dining table, glossy and perfect. My mom was beaming like she just cured a museum exhibit. "Look at these," she said, holding one up so the light caught the shimmer. My 6-year-old daughter, Julia, darted forward. She loved photos, loved anything that made her feel part of the family. Her little fingers grabbed a card before I could stop her. Her smile didn't last. She tilted her head, squinting, scanning the rows of cousins and grandparents. Jesse and Ryan, my sister Becky's kids, grinned right at the front, polished shoes, hair gelled stiff. Becky stood behind them with her husband, Jason, both of them looking like they were posing for a magazine cover. Even my mom and dad had made the cut, stiff smiles and all. But Julia, gone. Not cropped out, not hidden behind someone taller. Gone. "Where am I?" Julia asked, her voice small. I leaned closer, my chest tightened. She had been right there that day. Front row. Pale yellow dress with little daisies on it. Her hand tucked into Jesse's for courage. "Maybe it's just this one," I muttered, reaching for another card. Julia grabbed one, two, then another and another. Her breathing quickened, but I was there. I sat in the front row. I remember. I flipped card after card, hoping, praying one had slipped through, but every single one was the same. Julia erased, like she had never been part of the family at all. For half a second, denial clung to me. Maybe the printer messed up. Maybe it was a glitch. Then I saw it. The floorboard behind Jesse copied and pasted where Julia's shoes had been. A shadow smudge duplicated, stretched unnaturally across the front row. The curve of Jesse's hand cut strangely, like it had once been resting on someone who wasn't there anymore. My blood ran cold. This was a mistake. Someone had paid to have her removed. That takes effort, time, money, and apparently they put a lot of effort into erasing her. She flipped faster now, her little hands trembling. "Maybe I'm hiding," she whispered. "Maybe I'm too small. Maybe I'm behind someone." Her voice cracked. She dropped the cards onto the table. Her wide eyes filled. And then came the question that broke me. Why am I not in any? I pulled her against me, felt her shoulders shaking. She's 6 years old. She shouldn't even know what it feels like to be erased. But she does now. I want to scream, rip those perfect, glossy lies in half, shove them back in Becky's face. Instead, I kept my voice even, my jaw tight enough to ache, because silence right then was louder. Across the room, my mom adjusted a car on the mantel like nothing was wrong. "The colors look so clean this year," she said smug. My phone buzzed. A message in the family group chat. "Becky finally looks uniform. Uniform, like my daughter was a stain they'd scrubbed out." Julia wiped her face with her sleeve, still scanning the room. Her little voice was shaking. "But I was there. Why am I not there now?" Nobody answered. My dad cleared his throat, muttered, "We just wanted it tidy." My mom sighed, as if she were explaining something obvious. We all talked about it, me, Dad, and Becky. We agreed it was better this way. Her dress didn't fit. She stood out, and it ruined the picture. It's not personal. Julia's lips trembled, her cheeks blotched red, but I was smiling. The silence after that was suffocating. I held her tighter, my fury a cold, sharp thing under my skin. I didn't yell. I didn't give them the performance they were waiting for. But inside, I made a promise. This would be the last time they erased my daughter. The cards gleamed under the light, each one a polished lie. And I knew exactly what I was going to do next. The next morning, my mom opened her gift and went pale. Becky was always the investment. I was always the labor. It started small. She got piano lessons. I got a mop. She had soccer practice 3 nights a week. I scrubbed the kitchen floor. By the time we hit high school, the pattern wasn't even hidden anymore. When Grandma's knee started giving her trouble, it was me they called. "Megan, help her upstairs. Megan, make sure she eats." Becky's excuse: her schedule is too full. Of course, Becky's schedule was sacred. Mine was just available. I asked once if I could join a drama club at school. My dad didn't even look up from his newspaper. Becky already has 3 activities. Do you want to drain us dry? My mom smirked. You learned plenty of lessons cleaning the house. Yep, nothing screams well-rounded childhood like perfecting the art of scrubbing mildew. That was childhood. Becky polished me invisible. When Becky married Jason, the investment finally paid dividends. My parents smiled as if they had brought royalty into the world. They handed Becky and Jason a generous down payment for their first house. After that, they paid for brand new furniture. And when Becky decided she wanted new counters, they contributed to the renovations as well. I stood off to the side watching everything unfold, quiet, resentful, and slightly amused. Truly, they behaved as though Becky had earned an Olympic medal simply for saying, I do. So when I fell in love in my 20s, I thought maybe, just maybe, they might see me as something more than a live-in maid with a heartbeat. Spoiler, they didn't. His name doesn't matter. Let's just call him the disappearing act. We were together for a couple of years. We weren't married, but we were discussing moving in together. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, carefully and cautiously asking my parents for help. Not a deposit, not a house, just a little assistance with rent. Becky received a house. I asked for an apartment. You don't need it. My mom said bluntly, stay here. There's space. Space, right? What she really meant was, stay here. Keep cooking. Keep cleaning. Keep helping Grandma. Stay useful. I swallowed my resentment and forced a smile. Sure. Then I moved out anyway. The flat was a shoebox, barely large enough for the 2 of us. The rent consumed half our paychecks. The furniture was secondhand, rickety and uneven, but freedom doesn't require matching curtains. Of course, I still came back. Old habits die hard. I helped Grandma with meals, kept her company, and made sure she was okay. I cared about her in a way my parents didn't. During that time, I got pregnant. The timing wasn't ideal. We were juggling jobs, bills, and his late-night study sessions. Still, I thought maybe, just maybe, my parents would finally see me. See us. They didn't. I hinted. I asked gently. One night, I said outright, could you help us with rent just for a while? It's hard. My dad shook his head, already irritated. We don't have money for that. A week later, Becky received new furniture, paid for by my parents. The disappearing act lasted a year and a half after Julia was born. Then he announced he'd been accepted into a master's program out of state. He promised we'd stay in touch. 2 months later, he had a new girlfriend. Julia was still one at the time. I was alone. I couldn't afford the flat on my salary, so I packed our lives into boxes and moved back home. I thought maybe I'd at least reclaim the comfort of my childhood bedroom. I was wrong. The room had been remodeled. Fresh paint, new curtains, toys arranged neatly in the corner. Ryan's name spelled out in glitter letters above the bed. My nephew's room. Ryan didn't even live there. He just visited sometimes. My old room had been turned into a shrine for Becky's son. Becky's childhood bedroom remained untouched, preserved like a time capsule. Meanwhile, Julia and I were pushed into the attic. The walls were shabby. The ceiling sloped so low it scraped my knuckles every time I changed the sheets. It was drafty in winter and sweltering in summer. There was barely enough space for 2 beds squeezed side by side. It's fine, Mom said when I objected. Ryan needs his own space when he visits. You'll be fine up there. So I carried the boxes upstairs. Every creak of the attic floor was a reminder I didn't belong. At first, Julia was too young to notice. But children grow quickly. By 6, she noticed everything. Jesse and Ryan each had their own bedrooms. 2 each, really one at home and one here. Julia had none. One day she quietly asked, why do I share with you? Why don't I have my own? I smoothed her hair and told her it was temporary. I lied, because the truth was I couldn't save money fast enough to get us out. Almost every paycheck went straight into the household. Food, bills, the contributions I was expected to make. I tried to save, but it was never sufficient. And every time Julia wondered why she didn't have what her cousins did, it cut deeper. It's strange. People think cruelty has to be loud. Screaming, shouting, breaking things. But sometimes cruelty is silent. It's the quiet choice to pay for one child's house while denying the other rent money. It's a glittered name above a door where your daughter's crib should be. It's the word fine tossed at you while you're being sent to an attic. That silence is louder than any yell. I sense the tension rising, thick and inevitable, because what had once been directed at me was now shifting toward Julia, and I refused to allow them to wipe her out the way they had wiped me out. I didn't yet know the method, but I knew something had to give. Something had to crack. Sleep never came that night. Julia eventually drifted off beside me in our attic room, holding her stuffed bunny as if it were the last steady thing in her world. I remained awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling where old water stains twisted into shadowy shapes. Every creak in the beams sounded like the house whispering my place in it. Beneath everyone else, I reached for my phone and opened a chat with a friend who worked at a bar downtown. She'd Snorts mentioned before that they were constantly short on hands, and I understood that if I accepted, it might be my way out. No sleep, no rest, but freedom never comes cheap. Before I could second-guess myself, my thumbs were already typing. Do you still need night staff? I'll take the shifts. Send. It was impulsive. I already worked days while Julia was in school, and nights were supposed to mean rest. But there was no rest in that attic. Not after watching my daughter cry over those damn Christmas cards. If I had to exhaust myself completely to shield her, so be it. I was finished surviving on scraps from people who never intended to feed me. I slipped down the hallway toward Grandma's room. Her lamp still burned, casting a gentle glow beneath the door. I tapped lightly and stepped inside. She was propped against her pillows, glasses resting low on her nose, turning the pages of a crossword, sharp as ever. Couldn't sleep? She asked without lifting her gaze. I let out a quiet laugh. You know me too well. Sitting on the edge of her bed, I pulled one of the glossy cards from my pocket and handed it to her. She examined it carefully, her brows slowly drawing together. Then she noticed it, or rather, she noticed what was missing, and her mouth tightened into a thin line. Julia was there. Yes, I said evenly. Front row yellow dress, but apparently yellow doesn't match the uniform they wanted. With a sigh, she placed a card on the blanket. That was when I told her everything about the night shifts, the bartending job, the hours that would cut into whatever strength I had left. I can't keep her here, I said, my voice breaking on the last word. Not when they treat her like this. I'll work nights. Save. We'll move out. Grandma studied me for a long moment, her eyes sharp in the lamplight. Finally, she said, You won't need to do that. I frowned. What do you mean? She shook her head and returned to her crossword. Just leave it with me. Cryptic, like one of her puzzles. I didn't push further. I kissed her cheek and headed back upstairs, my thoughts still circling the bar job. Morning arrived too quickly. I dragged myself downstairs, bracing for another argument, another lecture. Instead, something unusual caught my eye on the living room table. A small, neatly wrapped box resting among the leftover decorations as if it always belonged there. It hadn't been there the night before. Mom noticed it before I could say anything. Oh, how sweet. A gift from Grandma. She smirked, tugging at the ribbon like she was unwrapping a prize. I stood still, Julia hiding partly behind my leg. Mom lifted the lid. Her smile vanished. She pulled out a stack of papers, scanned them quickly, then went rigid. The color drained from her face. What is this? She hissed, then louder for everyone to hear. What the hell is this? Is this some kind of joke? Dad stepped closer, leaning over her shoulder to read. His mouth dropped open. I moved nearer, heart hammering in my chest, and caught sight of the heading on the top sheet. Legal formatting. Official seals. Not a joke. Before I could speak, the hallway floor creaked. Grandma entered, slow but steady, with the lawyer I had seen once or twice before beside her. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. It's not a joke, she said calmly. That is an eviction notice, and I've already changed my will. Megan and Julia will have this house. You'll get nothing. Silence exploded through the room. Mom sputtered. Dad stared at the documents as if they might ignite in his hands. Julia squeezed my hand so tightly it hurt. I couldn't move. Then the shouting erupted. Mom's voice turned shrill, cracking with disbelief. You can't do this. You're not in your right mind. Dad tried another approach, smoother, almost pleading. Think about what you're saying. Think about the family. Grandma didn't waver. I am thinking about the family. I'm thinking about the child you tried to erase. The lawyer cleared his throat. Everything was drafted correctly, witnessed, and signed. It stands. I swear I saw Dad's knees buckle slightly. And me? I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. After all these years of being invisible, erased, pushed into attics, something had finally broken. And silenced. It wasn't me who finally screamed loud enough to be heard. It was Grandma, and she'd chosen me. I met Julia's eyes. She was still clutching my hand, her face pale. But for the first time in days, I saw something in her expression besides confusion. Hope. The chaos swelled again. Mom pacing. Dad muttering. Both of them throwing accusations like confetti. Megan manipulated you. She poisoned you against us. This is elder abuse. Grandma's laugh cut through it all, sharp and bitter. The only abuse here is what you've done to her and that child. My mom's mouth snapped shut. My dad sat down heavily, as if the air had gone out of him. Julia leaned into me, whispering, "What's happening?" I kissed her hair. Something good, I murmured. Something finally good. I didn't know what came next. Would they fight it in court? Spread more lies? Try to claw their way back into control? Probably. But right then, in that moment, the tide had turned. The house went quiet after Grandma's bombshell. Too quiet. No shouting matches. No slamming doors. Just a heavy, suffocating silence of people plotting. My parents barely looked at me. Dad busied himself in the garden, hacking at shrubs that didn't need cutting. Mom clattered dishes louder than usual, the noise sharp and deliberate, her version of shouting without words. Julia noticed. "Is it over now?" She asked me one night in our attic room, her voice small in the dark. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to lie. Instead, I kissed her forehead and whispered, "Not yet," because I knew better. That silence wasn't peace. It was the sound of a storm building. It arrived 3 mornings later. A knock at the door. Sharp. Official. My chest tightened. Julia's hand slipped into mine instinctively. Mom beat me to the door, her tone instantly syrupy. "Oh, officers. Thank you for coming." And there they were, 2 police officers and a woman with a clipboard, a PS, Adult Protective Services. My stomach dropped. The taller officer cleared his throat. "We've had a report of possible elder abuse in this household. We'll need to speak to everyone separately." Elder abuse. Of course, I didn't need a crystal ball to know who made that call. They separated us. Grandma to her room. Julia led gently to the kitchen, though she looked back at me, wide-eyed and scared. I sat stiff on the couch while Mom hovered in the hallway, whispering words like confused and safety, and were worried. My blood ran cold. They weren't just trying to smear me. They were trying to put me in handcuffs. If they arrest me, I thought, what happens to Julia? Who takes her? Not them. Please, not them. I swallowed hard and tried to keep my voice even as the questions began. "Do you prepare meals for your grandmother?" "Yes," I said carefully. "I always have." "Were you alone with her before she signed those documents?" "Yes, but not during." "Who was the man in her room that morning?" "Her lawyer, the one she called." The questions weren't unfair, but the way the officers' pens scratched across their notepads, the way they traded looks, it felt like guilt was already written on my forehead. From down the hall, I caught fragments of Grandma's voice through her door, clear, steady. By the time the officers came back out, their expressions had shifted. Suspicion gone, replaced by something harder. They weren't looking at me anymore. They were looking at my parents. And then Grandma insisted on coming out herself. She leaned on her cane, but her voice was iron. No one forced me. I asked my lawyer here myself. I knew exactly what I was doing, and I changed my will because it's my right to do so. Silence. Then she turned her gaze on my parents. The only abuse in this house is the way you treat Megan and that child. If words could slap, that one landed hard. The APS worker closed her folder with a snap. I don't see any concerns here. Everything appears in order. The officers nodded, polite but firm. Thank you for your time. We're satisfied there's nothing further for us to pursue. Relief hit me so hard I nearly collapsed. I pulled Julia into my arms the second she was back by my side. She buried her face in my shoulder, trembling. But the relief didn't last long, because Grandma wasn't finished. She turned on my parents, her voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. To call the police on your own daughter, to lie about me, to put my great-grandchild through this. She shook her head, fury radiating off her. You don't belong under my roof. Mom gasped, clutching the back of a chair like she might faint. Dad opened his mouth, but no words came out. You'll move out, Grandma said flatly. I don't care how, but you will. It wasn't suggestion. I'd never seen my parents speechless before. Later, when the officers left and the front door clicked shut, the silence returned. But it wasn't the same silence as before. This one was jagged, dangerous. My parents sat rigid at the table, their faces pale, their eyes darting between me and Grandma like they couldn't decide who to hate more. Julia pressed closer to me. Are we okay now? She whispered. I kissed her hair. Yes, I said. My voice was steady. For the first time, I believed it. Of course. I didn't know exactly what would happen next. Would they fight? Contest of will? Spread more lies? Probably. But the tide had turned. Their attempt to erase me had failed. Their attempt to erase Julia had backfired. And now they were the ones being erased. A week later, the silence broke. Not with yelling, not with slammed doors, but with threats. My parents circled me in the kitchen like vultures, hissing promises. You'll regret this. We'll make sure they take Julia away from you. You think you're safe? You're not. I didn't flinch, but Julia heard. She sat on the stairs, clutching her stuffed bunny, her eyes wide. That was the last straw. Grandma called her lawyer the next morning. By noon, 2 officers were standing in the doorway while my parents stuffed clothes into suitcases. It wasn't dramatic. No screaming, no dragging. Just the sound of zippers and the snap of a folder as the officer handed them a no-contact order. You'll have to find somewhere else, Grandma said coldly, and you'll leave Megan and Julie alone. They left under police supervision. That night, Julia slept through without waking once. Her first full night's sleep in weeks. Fast forward 6 months. Word travels in families, especially ours. A cousin called me, half whispering like she was passing on state secrets. They asked Becky for help. I nearly dropped the phone. Of course they did. Becky, the golden child, the one they poured every penny into. And I asked and she said, it's not a good time. Money's tight. Money's tight. After everything they gave her, house deposit, renovations, furniture. Now, when they had nothing, she suddenly couldn't spare a dime. I shouldn't have laughed, but I did. By the end of the month, the whispers grew louder. My parents were seen at a shelter. Later, someone mentioned a dingy rental in the rough part town. The irony, after losing everything, they didn't fit into Becky's perfect picture either. Meanwhile, Julia and I live downstairs with Grandma. She has her own small room now, painted soft yellow. Every night, she decorates the walls with new drawings. In the mornings, I watch Grandma beam at Julia over breakfast, smiling at her like she's the only child in the world that matters. We are not rich. We are not glamorous. But for the first time, we are safe. We are a family. So what do you think? Did my grandmother do the right thing? Or did she go too far, disinheriting her own daughter? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for